So Danielle, Sunday marked the 5th year of George Floyd's death. It was the 5th anniversary. We decided anniversary is a content neutral word, so it was okay to use it for a bad thing. There's been, what was really, as some people have said, the Black Lives Matter was possibly sort of the largest social justice movement in American history.
Mhm.
But here we are 5 years later, and, uh, it's worth taking a look at whether that has proven sustainable. And there's an article, in the New York Times with the headline, "5 years after George Floyd's murder, the backlash takes hold." And it talks about how, the Black Lives Matter movement has sort of, as it puts it, given way to the politics of white grievance championed by President Trump.
Mhm.
Um, and, I was a little surprised, Danielle, that before we started taping, you said that you thought this was good, that it had gone too far, and you were glad that white people were actually finally speaking up for themselves again. So tell me more about that.
You know good goddamn well that is not what I said. Or maybe that was the AI version of me. The MAGA AI version of Danielle, which would be fucking terrifying and also probably rich. Um, so here is the thing for me. One, it was hard for me to reckon with the fact that 5 years have passed since we all watched the absolute grotesque murder, suffocation of George Floyd under the knee of Derek Chauvin for over 9 minutes. And one of the stories, one of the many that I saw, were clips of a number of outlets, media outlets, AP, Washington Post, New York Times, Huffington Post, and others, and saying that words matter, that George Floyd did not die and he wasn't quote unquote killed, like you're killed in a vehicular accident. He was murdered, and that it is important for us and for his memory to be reminded of the fact that he was murdered by Derek Chauvin. And, when the New York Times even refers to the quote unquote backlash, it isn't a backlash, it is a white lash to what has happened. Following the murder of George Floyd, corporate America and other institutions decided that they were going to dive headfirst into diversity, equity, and inclusion, a practice one that had been around for many, many, many years, which was
Sure.
to create more inclusivity in our workspaces that didn't prioritize and center the ideas and positions of white cis hetero men. And that Harvard Review put out reports that said diversity was good for the bottom line. But the murder of George Floyd centered that for so many companies who wanted to ride the bandwagon of we're not racist, so let us do this thing. And then 5 years later, we see that Donald Trump has been reelected, that major corporations have rolled back their diversity, equity, and inclusion at his behest, but because it was what I thought then performative. I don't know what it is going to take for America to actually reckon with racism and reckon with the fact that racism is centered around white rage and centered around the fact that we continue to not teach about white domestic violence that has been at the core and is a founding principle of America, and that white people have been allowed to see themselves as benevolent beings, right? That everything has been done in order to shield them from the truth. You can look at Ron DeSantis's policies down in Florida. You can look at Donald Trump now utilizing civil rights policies and protections that were meant for Black people and marginalized people to protect them. Now he's using them to elevate white men because he believes that white men are the most aggrieved in this country. You can look
Yeah.
at the 39 white South Afrikaners that he has resettled in Alabama, right? Is saying, oh, they're facing a genocide, not the people of Gaza, not Palestinians. My God, if we use that word, then you'll absolutely be canceled or fucking detained. But it's South Afrikaners, him spreading a lie about them that tells you where this country is. And honestly, Andy, I don't know if in this era that we can ever think that we're going to have another reckoning, that there's going to be any more forward progress and not just a continued backslide.
This is a bit of a historical pattern. I mean, you had the civil rights, the marches, the Civil Rights Act of 1964, everything happening in the 60s. And then we got Richard Nixon. It sucks, but I don't know that this is an unusual aspect of America, of American history, that every time progress is made, there are people who are sitting there going, well, some of them are just straight up bigots and straight up racist and don't want there to be progress made at all. But then there's always the people who are like, it's too fast. You're moving too fast. We need to slow down.
Mhm.
It's never the people being discriminated against
Mm-mm.
who think we're moving too fast to end that discrimination. It's always the people who have benefited from discrimination who want to, who say they want to end that discrimination, but slowly. We can't do this. It's too much of a system shock. They make excuses, and it's grotesque. But that's sort of, that's one of the histories of centrism in this country, is that history. And so now we've got, as you said, Donald Trump is 100% convinced, as are most of his supporters, that white people, and white men in particular, are the most put upon people in America. It is absolutely wild that what they're basically saying is the people who caused the problem, which is white people and, America's original sin of slavery, and followed by, Jim Crow and everything like that. But the people who caused the problem are the ones who they get to set the terms, which makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. And so often when they talk, when I say so often, I mean pretty much always, when they talk about, white people are now under attack and white people are aggrieved, what they mean is there have been efforts to overturn the unfair advantages that white people have had since the founding of
Mhm.
this country. And I'm not saying anything that hasn't been commented on a million times before. It is fucking obvious that that's what's going
Mhm.
on. But somehow they have managed to set the tone of the conversation, is what I'm trying to get at. And so we have to read articles about the backlash, and whether the backlash is legitimate and whether things have gone too far. Same with the Me Too movement. A bunch of men decided the Me Too movement went too far. It wasn't a bunch of women who had been harassed and discriminated against who said Me Too went too far. It's a bunch of men who said it.
Mhm.
And it's the same exact thing.
Yeah, it's just, again, it's par for the Donald Trump, course, and this is where we need Democrats to have a really strong narrative and just like understand that they created a vacuum that Donald Trump was able to slide into. Right? It is not an either or proposition. It's like, how do we create a multiracial democracy instead of, like you said, picking and choosing who we're going to throw under the bus and when? Right? It is about how we're going to march forward together. And the way that it has been framed is as a binary. And
Right.
that, frankly, just doesn't exist.